Mysteries and legends have always fascinated people. That's why movies, games, and countless videos across the internet are filled with hidden secrets and unexplained mysteries woven into popular stories. But today, I want to do something different. I want to explore urban legends that for years were dismissed as nothing more than myths with no real evidence. The big plot twist, though, is that many of them were actually true. Maybe not exactly as the stories were originally told, but they followed the same core idea or concept behind the legend. So, without wasting any more time, let's get into it. The Haunted House of West Hobart. The Haunted House of West Hobart is located in a neighborhood near the center of the city in Tasmania, Australia. Over the years, countless reports of alleged hauntings, ghost sightings, and other paranormal activity have been shared by both tourists and the residents of West Hobart. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. West Hobart is an old town with an eerie atmosphere that almost feels designed for ghost stories. As usually happens though, most of these claims were either exposed as hoaxes or lacked enough evidence to support them, making it likely that many of the stories were completely fabricated. But as it turns out, at least one of them had a very real explanation. During the late 1980s and into the mid-1990s, rumors began spreading about a house in West Hobart that was supposedly so haunted it drove anyone living there insane. At first, the rumors caused widespread panic throughout the town, with locals doing everything they could to avoid the infamous haunted house. It wasn't until months later that authorities stepped in and finally uncovered what was really happening. While it was true that the people living in the house appeared to be losing their minds, it had nothing to do with ghosts or supernatural forces. Instead, a plant known as datura had been growing in the trees directly above the home, dropping its leaves into the family's rainwater collection tank. For a long time, the family had unknowingly been consuming tiny amounts of the plant every single day, slowly poisoning themselves. Over time, the constant exposure caused them to gradually lose their grip on reality, sinking deeper and deeper into a state of terrifying delirium. If you've never heard of it before, datura is a plant from the nightshade family, commonly known as devil's trumpet or devil's weed, and you'll soon understand why. Even though it looks harmless, datura contains incredibly powerful hallucinogenic compounds. For centuries, several Native American tribes used it during rites of passage and other sacred ceremonies. The Aztecs also used datura as a painkiller in certain rituals, including human sacrifices. It even became an ingredient in Haitian Vodou zombification rituals, where it was commonly known as devil's cucumber. As you've probably realized by now, datura isn't a typical recreational hallucinogen. There's a reason it was reserved for intense spiritual rituals and ceremonies, or taken only by people who had no idea what they were getting themselves into. Even in relatively small doses, datura can trigger horrifying delusions and complete detachment from reality. In larger amounts, it can cause paralysis and even death. Today, most cultures that once used the plant recognize it as extremely toxic and dangerous, and for good reason, they abandoned its use. Cropsy. If for some reason you traveled back to the 1970s and spent some time on Staten Island, it probably wouldn't take long before you heard the urban legend of a man known as Cropsy. According to the story, Cropsy was a kidnapper and serial killer who lost his own son and, consumed by grief, began abducting other people's children. The legend also claimed he had a hook instead of one hand, along with horrific scars, burns, and open wounds covering his face and body, giving him a truly terrifying appearance. And considering the vast stretches of isolated woodland throughout the area, it isn't surprising that a story like Cropsy eventually became part of the local folklore. But unfortunately, this wasn't just another made-up tale told by parents to keep their children from wandering too deep into the woods. Although the legend included obviously fictional details, like the hook for a hand and the gruesome scars, something far more disturbing was happening. At some point during the early 1970s, children on Staten Island really did begin disappearing. That's when the line between legend and reality started to blur, and the story of the real Cropsy quickly replaced the fictional one. So let's talk about the true story. Andre Rand was a man who lived in Manhattan. Born in 1944, he moved to Staten Island in the late 1960s after working for 2 years at the Willowbrook State School, an institution for children with disabilities. Rand was arrested in 1969 and spent more than a year in prison after attempting to assault a 9-year-old girl. After serving 16 months in prison and being released, reports of more missing girls on Staten Island began to surface. Among them was 5-year-old Alice Pereira, who vanished without a trace while playing in the lobby of her apartment building. Throughout the following decade, Rand remained the prime suspect in the disappearances and deaths of several young girls across the area. However, it wasn't until 1983, when he took 11 children from his neighborhood out for fast food before driving them to the airport, that he was finally arrested and sentenced to 10 months in jail. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, dozens of young children disappeared from Staten Island. Although Rand was often the last person seen with many of them, investigators never had enough evidence to convict him for the disappearances themselves. For years, he was regularly seen walking around with children, taking them out to lunch and dinner at local restaurants without raising much suspicion. After years of dead ends, detectives finally made a breakthrough in 1987 when they uncovered enough evidence to link Rand to the kidnapping and murder of 12-year-old Jennifer Schweiger, a girl with Down syndrome. In 1988, he was sentenced to life in prison. While he was behind bars, investigators uncovered additional evidence connecting him to several other child disappearances on Staten Island during the 1970s and 1980s. Unfortunately, he was formally charged in only one more major case in 2004, the kidnapping of Holly Ann Hughes. That conviction added another 13 years to his sentence, keeping him incarcerated until 2037. If he lives that long, he will be 93 years old by the time he's eligible for release. The Kennebec Valley. The Kennebec Valley is one of the most beautiful regions in Maine, covering more than 13,000 square kilometers of forests, rolling hills, and breathtaking wilderness surrounding the Kennebec River. Many cabin owners around the North Pond area describe it as one of the most peaceful places on Earth, but it wasn't always that way. Throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s, there were more than 1,000 reported break-ins at cabins around North Pond. For decades, no one knew who was responsible, especially because the burglaries almost always happened when the owners were away. It didn't take long for cabin owners to notice a pattern. The break-ins consistently increased in the weeks leading up to Memorial Day and again after Labor Day. The stolen items ranged from food, cookware, and books to propane tanks and personal hygiene products. With no real suspect, locals eventually gave the mysterious thief the nickname, the North Pond Hermit. At the time, there was nothing to suggest that all of the burglaries were connected, or that they were being committed by a single person. It wasn't unusual for groups of residents to organize searches through the surrounding woods in hopes of finding the hermit, but they never discovered a single trace of him, making the legend even more mysterious. Then, one afternoon in 2002, nearly 100 cabin owners gathered for a community meeting in North Pond. When someone asked how many of them had been victims of break-ins, almost every hand in the room went up. As you can imagine, the North Pond Hermit quickly became a local boogeyman, and stories about him were commonly told around campfires. After so many years without answers, most people believed whoever was behind the burglaries would never be caught. But in April 2013, everything changed. A man named Christopher Thomas Knight was arrested deep in the woods near North Pond by a police officer who had spent years searching for the mysterious thief. Once he arrived at the station, investigators asked why he barely responded to any of their questions. At first, they assumed he had trouble speaking, but eventually he admitted the truth. He was simply ashamed. Police soon discovered that Christopher had been living completely alone in the forest inside an unheated nylon tent, surviving almost entirely on supplies stolen from nearby cabins. Even more astonishing, he had endured Maine winters with temperatures dropping as low as 20 BRC -4 for years. He hadn't visited a doctor or taken any medication in nearly 3 decades. Perhaps the most incredible part of the North Pond Hermit's story is that, during all those years of isolation, he didn't have a single conversation with another human being. There was only one exception. After unexpectedly crossing paths with a hiker, he quietly said, "Hi," and kept walking. Understandably, Chris had completely lost track of time. When investigators asked how long he had been living in the woods, he replied that he'd been there since the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. Investigators later learned that Knight was just 20 years old when he chose to disappear into the wilderness, only a few years after graduating from high school. He never gave a clear explanation for why he walked away from society. Throughout his decades of isolation, he went to extraordinary lengths to remain invisible. He never built campfires, moved almost exclusively at night, and avoided all contact with other people for more than half of his life. He never drove a car, never sent an email, and didn't even know what the internet was until the day he was arrested. As detectives dug deeper into his life, they discovered that the only personal possession he had truly kept was his pair of eyeglasses, the same pair he'd been wearing for nearly 30 years, visible in his 1984 Lawrence High School yearbook photo. Everything else he owned, from his underwear to his winter coat, had been stolen from nearby cabins. After the investigation, Christopher Knight was sentenced to 7 months in jail. Once he served his sentence, he quietly disappeared from the public eye again. According to law enforcement, today he lives a peaceful and private life, somewhere in rural Maine. Throughout the late 1980s and the 1990s, rumors began spreading across northwest England about a massive bodybuilder known only as Purple Aki. According to the stories, Purple Aki wandered the streets of Liverpool, searching for muscular young men and rugby players, asking them one very strange question. Could he feel their muscles? If they agreed, he would squeeze their muscles for far longer than anyone would consider socially acceptable. Then he'd ask them to do squats, so he could feel the muscles in their thighs. Some teenagers even claimed that Purple Aki asked them to pose for him and would often offer workout and nutrition advice to anyone willing to stop and listen. Because the rumors were so unbelievably bizarre, almost nobody took them seriously at first. Before long, the story of Purple Aki had become an urban legend, with increasingly ridiculous details being added over time, including one version claiming he would literally swallow teenagers whole if they let him touch their muscles. But as the years passed, it became clear that Purple Aki wasn't just an imaginary character invented by teenagers to scare their friends. He was a real person. His name was Akinwale Arobike, and he regularly traveled across England by train, carrying nothing more than a plastic shopping bag, while approaching young men and asking if he could touch their muscles. Unsurprisingly, many people found his behavior deeply unsettling, and it wasn't uncommon for his face to appear in local newspapers. After several encounters with police, most of the allegations against him involved his disturbing behavior toward teenage boys. But around 1986, the story of Purple Aki took a much darker turn. Early that year, a 16-year-old student named B.A. Kelly was walking home from school when he crossed paths with Purple Aki, who immediately asked if he could feel his muscles. Frightened by the bizarre request, Gary refused and ran away. Later that same year, Aki allegedly chased Gary again, this time near an outdoor swimming pool. Realizing he was being followed, Gary sprinted toward New Brighton railway station and jumped onto the tracks in an attempt to escape. Tragically, Gary was accidentally electrocuted by the railway's live third rail. Because the entire incident happened while Gary was fleeing from him, Purple Aki was convicted of manslaughter, charged with harassing 14 teenage boys, and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. However, in 1988, Aki appealed the conviction, arguing that he had only been found guilty because he was black. In the end, the judges ruled there wasn't enough evidence to hold him legally responsible for Gary's death. Believe it or not, his conviction was overturned. He was released from prison, and he was awarded $35,000 compensation. Between 1988 and 2006, Aki repeatedly found himself back in prison after repeatedly failing to control his obsession with touching, feeling, and measuring other people's muscles. Then, in 2003, he was arrested once again for 15 counts of harassment and witness intimidation, resulting in a 6-year prison sentence. Like many repeat offenders, he was also banned from loitering outside schools in the area. Just a few months after being released, he was sentenced to another 15 months in prison for continuing the exact same behavior. After serving that sentence, Aki was arrested yet again just weeks after his release in 2010, and once more in 2015. Following his most recent release, he reportedly moved to Leeds, where rumors began circulating that he had died during the COVID-19 pandemic. Those rumors didn't last long. In 2023, new videos of Aki surfaced online, showing him wandering the streets of Leeds and, just as people expected, asking complete strangers if he could touch their muscles. So, to this day, Purple Aki is still alive and well, and chances are he'll continue his unusual behavior, with or without permission, for many years to come. Ellie Loyan. According to a Swiss urban legend, beginning in the early 2000s, several people claim to have encountered a mysterious human figure deep within the forests of Freiburg in western Switzerland, near the village of Maules. Based on dozens of eyewitness reports collected over the years, the figure was described as standing around 6 feet, 1.8 meters tall, and always wearing an old-fashioned gas mask that completely covered its face, along with a coverall and a long cloak. Most people who claimed to encounter the figure said it never behaved aggressively, but that didn't make the experience any less unsettling. and it became common for parents to contact the police after their children reported seeing the strange figure in the woods. As you might expect, it didn't take long for locals to create their own explanations. Some insisted the figure was the ghost of a mentally disturbed soldier, while others were convinced it was an alien. For years, the story was dismissed as nothing more than an urban legend, and the mysterious figure became known as Le Loyon, also nicknamed the Ghost or the Hermit of Maules. During the early 2000s, Le Loyon existed almost entirely as local folklore, since there was no solid evidence that the mysterious figure was real. Everything changed in 2013. That year, the Swiss-French newspaper Matin published the first known photograph of Le Loyon after it was submitted by a random passerby. The image quickly attracted international attention and sparked a wave of new discussions about the mysterious figure. But after the photograph was published, the story suddenly went silent. People from all over the country soon began traveling to the forests surrounding Maules in hopes of catching a glimpse of Le Loyon. The last known sighting of Le Loyon took place in June 2013, when a local woman named Marianne de Cruz reported seeing the mysterious figure quietly walking through the forest while carrying a bouquet of flowers. Later that same year, Le Loyon's clothing was discovered abandoned in the middle of the woods, alongside a handwritten note titled "Death Certificate and Last Will of the Ghost of Maules." In the letter, Le Loyon accused the media of having killed a harmless person by exposing his existence and turning him into nothing more than a circus attraction. The note also explained that, because of all the unwanted attention, he had been forced to abandon his daily walks, described in the letter as his therapy of happiness. After the mysterious note was published in local newspapers, many people concluded that Le Loyon had taken his own life, although that was never confirmed. As of Pumbly 24, no one had ever seen Le Loyon's real face. Over the years, many people have theorized that the mysterious figure may have been someone with a severe facial disfigurement who simply wanted to avoid being recognized, which could explain the constant use of the old gas mask. But unless new evidence ever comes to light, the true identity of Le Loyon and the reason he chose to live hidden in the forests of Maules will likely remain a mystery forever.